There we go. Thank you, Siri. So the almost 20-year-long debate on the introduction of a basic income grant has proven to be quite contentious and even more pertinent given the current status of our economy. So the purpose of this dialogue then is to create a platform for both sides of the coin, arguments for and arguments against, but more than anything, to reach some kind of common ground as South Africans as to what kind of South Africa do we want to see, and what role can the youth of South Africa actually play? The questions that we will be addressing this afternoon include whether or not the argument of dependency, if it is just a strategy to obscure the reality of ordinary South Africans on the ground, and how will the introduction of a basic income grant actually affect women-headed households? How will it affect youth unemployment in general? And will this policy recommendation actually attempt to solve the reality of the socially unequal and historically racially segregated society? I think these are very meaty questions that our three speakers are well informed on this topic and will be able to assist us and guide us through. The first speaker that we have this afternoon is Mr. Kokoma Muti, who is the co-founder of Botshabelo Unemployment Movement, which falls under the umbrella of the Assembly of the Unemployed Movement. And then we also have Christina van Straten. She's a researcher from the Studies of Poverty and Inequality Institute, and she'll be standing in for Isobel Frey, who is the director of the Studies of Poverty and Inequality Institute. Unfortunately, Mr. Teso Arnold could not join us this afternoon, who is the brand and project manager at Harambee Youth Unemployment Accelerator. He and his colleagues have embarked on a trip to the Northern Cape, and they have a project running that side. But he would have loved to be with us this afternoon. But then it means we just have two speakers and a room full of young people who I believe will add valuable contributions to our discussion today. Please, again, feel free to interact on the chat box as we go along. Share your questions and comments. If you find something interesting, please do not feel restricted to not say anything. And if you are able to use the raise hand function as well, when we get to our Q&A session, please do so. Yes, I think we can then begin and start off with Tina. Are you with us?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Hi, Tina. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Perhaps you can start with a very, I guess, straightforward question, but what is your take on the proposal to have a basic income grant in South Africa?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to add a little disclaimer that I'm not an economist. I'm a sociologist by profession. So whilst I'm sure Isabel would have given some very convincing arguments regarding the economics of a basic income grant, my speciality is more focused on the social politics of it. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and say that the basic income grant is not a silver bullet solution for every problem that we face in South Africa, but it is a multifaceted solution, meaning that it would impact many different sectors and help us to reduce the burdens of many different inequalities in our country. So the basic income grant is essentially must be seen as a starting point to uplifting over 13 million people out of starvation. And the myths regarding dependency, the fact that the basic income grant makes people lazy and that people won't want to find work, the myths that we can't afford it as a country, and that it's never been done before, those are not true. And any research, basic research, search into Google would tell you that. But we at SPI have been working on research to showcase how the basic income grant can be funded and why it's so important. So I think the question of, can South Africa afford to implement a basic income grant? We should rather reframe that and say, can we afford not to provide dignity and life back to our people? Yeah.
Thank you so much for that insight into the feasibility or just the need in general of ensuring that 30 million people in our country no longer have to, be exposed to extensive poverty. But perhaps now we can hear from Mr. Muti. What is your take on the proposal of a basic income grant in South Africa?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. And good afternoon, and thanks for your input, comrade. We should not rely on the stats that the government is giving us, because those stats are really wrong. That is number one. And then number two, I'm not an academic. I'm just an activist. I have graduated from the struggles on the ground. And then my information here will not be based on the academic side, but it is informed by the struggles on the ground. What I'm seeing and what are we fighting for? That is number one. But to say that basic income grant will perpetuate the culture of dependency, that is not true. Where are the work? So that the unemployed people who are between 11 and 12 million in this country doesn't have work. And then when those 11 to 12 million unemployed people in this country are not working, then what? Are we saying the status quo must continue so that we can sit on a time bomb? Because currently, comrades, we are sitting on a time bomb. If nothing is not going to be happen, or if basic income grant is not going to be implemented by the government, then we have a time bomb. What happened in Durban and in Gauteng, it was not because of Zuma, but it was because of the inequality, the poverty, and the struggles that the poor people, particularly those who are living in shacks, that are suffering on a daily basis because the government doesn't do anything to them. But the government have given people 350 and it stopped it. But because through our call as the Assembly of the Unemployed, including the hashtag pay the grants under C19 collusion, we called for the government to implement, to bring back the 350. But when it stops next year in March, then what is going to happen to the 11 to 12 plus the other unemployment that we are going to see growing in this country? Because every year the student when they have passed, even those who are graduated from universities can't get jobs. So the dependency thing that people are talking about is really not proper. People should not say that, because some of those people who are saying that it causes dependency, they are the people who can buy loaf of bread on a daily basis. But what about us, the unemployed and the poor working communities? We are living in a dire situation. The government have pushed us to a corner in terms of implementing austerity measures, austerity policies, austerity budget. So those who are saying we are going to create a dependency, really they don't know what they are talking about. And the other thing that people are talking about, the comrade have already alluded to, is the laziness. They are calling us lazy as unemployed people, but the economy of this country has fallen even before COVID-19. The economy was just was falling apart. Ramaphosa, you know, Mandela have come with RDP, Reconstruction and Development Program. And then Mbeki came with another one. Every 5 years, African National Congress changes its policies in terms of developing the economy of this country. So there is no political will in this country to implement the economic policies that will assist the poor of the poorest. I'm not talking about the middle class here. I'm staying in a ghetto, in a township called Botshabelo, where unemployment is about 70%. So I'm not going to listen to people who are saying we are lazy, it is going to cause dependency. And also, the comrade have also alluded to this point as well, that the research have been made in terms of where the money can come from. We know when we are doing this call or demand as basic income grant as the assembly of the unemployed, we are backed up by those researchers and academics that we are working with, who are assisting us in terms of where the monies can come from. You can tax the rich. You can stop the illicit money flow. You can use the PIC money as well. So we know about all these things. But I'm not going to entertain those who are going to say we are lazy, it is going to cause dependency. Even graduates are not working in this country. Where is the work? Those who are very fortunate, those who are connected to the ANC are working. But what about the person on the street, the dropouts? You know, when we have 10 people in grade 0, when they reach matric or standard grade 12, those people are no more 10. They will be 4 or 5. What about the other 6 that have just disappeared between these years? What is going to happen to them? But thanks, Comrade Chair. I will also come into other questions that you have asked. But really, basic income grant is going to assist even those who are working, because those who are working are assisting other family members. You know, your uncle, your auntie, because you will give them sugar, you will give them tea, you will give them meal. But when they got this basic income grant of 1.5 that we are calling for, remember that the burden on your shoulders, they will not be there, because those people will be getting something. And the other thing again is that when they get this 1.5, there will be a demand of tea, a demand of sugar, a demand of clothes. You know, in other words, factories will be operating, because now African National Congress can't even open one factory in this country. So when they give the unemployed between 18 and 59, this basic income grant, there will be a demand. And when there is a demand, that means production will be happening in this country. Thank you, Comrade Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mutsi, for that valuable contribution. I think you really touched on the experience on the ground, which is something that we really do need to focus on and to discuss more than to just look at the numbers and the stats. But the reality is what would really encourage even our government to move effectively. I see Wonke Mabey has his hand up.
Yes, my hand is up. Can you hear me properly, Chair?
Yes.
Okay. I think for me, I want to touch on 1 or 2 things that have been said by the latter speaker. One of the key things is to say to me, before we even blame the government, we need to check in ourselves in how we are contributing to the local economy. I will make a typical example. We live in the communities and in our townships, but you would find it's us, the same people who rent our houses to the Somalians to own shops and they ended up killing the spaza shops that were owned by our own people. That is where the problem started for me, because when we grew up in an environment where we used to have spaza shops that was owned maybe by Mama Dlamini or whatever the case may be, by a neighbor, by my neighbor or whoever. But in nowadays, that kind of an economy has been killed. Not by the government. We also add a contributing factor as to how that our local economy has been killed. Because for me, I think before we even start, chair and host of this session, before we even start to blame the government and other institutions or whoever, we need to pinpoint what is the problem? How can we get to the solution of the problem? And how have we contributed to the problem? By us killing the spaza shops that were owned by other people that were living close in our proximity, we have partly contributed into killing the local economy. Because I don't have a problem with Somalians owning shops. Hear me correct, Chair. I don't have a problem with them owning shops and stuff. The problem I have is that we always pinpoint to the government. But the question I normally have to people, is it the government that says rent your own house to the Somalians to own shops in our communities? No, the government doesn't say that. But we do it in our own selves. But to go around and saying the government does this and that and that and that. So to me, Chair, I think maybe those are one of the things we need to look at before we even blame the government, to say, what are we doing in our corners to make sure we promote our local economy? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Wonke, for that contribution. I think it's something that we have noted, and we will discuss a bit later on when we touch on what kind of change is expected with regards to youth unemployment, even with this proposal of a basic income grant. But for now, I will give Christina the platform to share.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think those were really valuable contributions. Also, just on the topic of dependency, we are all dependent on government one way or another. Anyone that doesn't think that really needs to just think about the amount of control that politics and governance plays in our everyday lives with regards to taxes, public services, etc. And so the idea that grant recipients will be dependent on government is flawed. We are all dependent on government. And in fact, these grants would make people less dependent on government in future, because research shows that these grants, there are pilot studies done all over the world, but thinking particularly of the ones in Kenya, USA, Canada, and Namibia, that showcase that people became far more employable after they received grants. It's small things that us in privileged positions don't think about. How do you get a job when you can't afford the taxi that you need to take to go and get a job? How do you attend school when you don't have food in your stomach? How are you supposed to learn? We think about the fact that people can't get jobs because they can't afford the start out uniform that they need to work in those jobs. So if anything, this grant does the opposite of promoting dependency. It promotes people to become participants in the economy. Comrade Motsi also spoke about the fact that it gives people spending power. This has the power to rejuvenate township economies that are dead because there's no money in the townships and unemployment is so high. I think he mentioned a stat of 70%, it's likely even more. But when you are injecting this money into township economies, businesses around there are going to thrive. We've also seen that, I think it was in the pilot in Kenya, if I'm not mistaken, where women who bear the overwhelming brunt of care work, so that's like looking after children, cleaning, cooking, that sort of thing, were far more likely to enter the workforce after they received their grants, because it gives them that little boost to help them get those jobs and get that work. How do you, who looks after 5 children, go for a job interview? Yeah, so I think just there's a multitude of factors that would severely benefit from this grant. And then also, I think the proposed amount of the grants, I know Comrade Motsi mentioned the 1,500 Rand figure, which is also quite popular. At SPI, we are advocating for the amount of 1,335 Rand, and that is based on the upper bound poverty line calculated by Stats SA. So that basically says that every human in South Africa needs at least 1,335 Rand a month to survive on the upper bound poverty line. So if you got a grant of 1,335 Rand a month and it wouldn't stop you, it wouldn't make you quit your job, then I don't think it's a fair argument to say that the poorest of the poor are simply not going to look for work because they're getting this tiny amount of money that is very significant in their lives and has all the potential to make a change in their lives. But we can't say that that is going to keep people from trying to get work. I don't know anyone that would be happy living on 1,335 Rand a month, but it is a lifeline for those that don't have any other options at the moment. And we also see that the amount of like entrepreneurial adventures that people embark on when they get these grants is incredible. People just able to start selling nuts on the side of the road or fruit, you know, people that have money for seeds to farm. Food production could also grow incredibly as a result of a basic income grant. So yeah, I think really important of us to think of those things.
Thank you so much, Christina. Your input is really appreciated and helping us to think about the long-term positive impact on the economy, especially our township economies, you know, with the introduction of the basic income grant. Mr. Motsi, you had your hand raised.
No, thanks, ma'am. One, I don't know, you were saying I must come in.
Oh, yes, you had your hand raised earlier.
Okay.
Unless
No,
you can move on to the next point.
No, I was just wondering, one to answer Comrade Wonke. One, comrades, we are, as unemployed and then Assembly of the Unemployed, we are also internationalists. We can't come here and maybe talk about xenophobic elements here. These Somalians and other brothers from Africa, they are in Africa here. But now on the ground, we don't have the means to sustain and continue with the local economy, spaza shops, you know, you mentioned them, because we don't have anything. Comrade Wonke must understand that we are living from hand to mouth currently. We are not getting any assistance rather than the 350. And the 350, you can't buy 30 loaves of bread per month with that particular amount. So, Comrade Wonke, when you are employed, my dear comrade, it is very good. And we say, thanks God that you are in employment. But what about the 12 million people that we are talking about? And then you say we must not blame the government. Who must we blame?
I chair order, Chair. Okay. Can I clarify?
I'm still
order?
talking, Tate Wonke. I'm still on the platform. I gave you your time to tell us that we, you know, we have lost the local economy. But
yeah,
now,
I'd like everybody to just respect the speakers and please allow everyone to have a chance to comment, but also try and keep your comments brief to give the other speakers a chance to. Sorry, I'm having network issues here. But yeah, please lift up your hand. We will recognize, and then you can go ahead. Motsi, please continue.
I thought I was recognized, but if not, I'm very sorry, comrades. But one, that was my point to say we should not come with xenophobic elements here. We are all from Africa. Some of us have been in the trenches in these countries that we are now saying these people are taking our economy. We can't allow that argument, you know. That is number one. Number two, we should blame the government. The government is the one who's implementing these austerity measures that are really, that is a war against the poor working class. That is a war. So in terms of dealing with this war, we can't return war with war, but we are demanding basic income grant to assist the poor. And the comrade have talked about other things, including CVs. When you are doing a CV, you must pay for that particular CV. And then when these people are unemployed, they don't have anything, even their 350 are being rejected by SASSA. What should they do? Should they go and break into your house, Comrade Wonke, so that they can take food from your fridge? Is that what you are saying that people should do? Because those people who are poor, who don't have anything, they will one day do that call. But remember, the basket, the food basket of Gauteng is about 1.4 per month. So you see the difference when we are talking about the amount. We are engaging with all the other people who are supporting us in terms of demanding the basic income grant, so that we can come with one demand in terms of this. But thanks, Comrade Chair. I'm very sorry, Comrade Wonke, when I've stepped on your toes. But truth have to be spoken here.
Thank you, Mr. Muti, for your response to Wonke's question and comment as well. Perhaps Wonke can just have a few minutes to also respond. Wonke?
Okay, I thought Abangilo was going to speak before me, but it's fine. I can still go ahead. Chair, I was not trying to be disruptive in this session we're in, but what I was trying to say is, there's a personal attack on me, but that is an issue I can handle. I don't have an issue with that. But yeah, I do not like one making some insinuation about me being xenophobic, because what I was saying was clear to say, before we even say the government is at fault about our local economy, we as the people in the townships, we are also at fault, because we are the people who killed our local economy and made it. We rented our house to Somalians, all of our houses. I didn't say I have a problem with them owning shops in our townships, no. But I said before we blame the government about the government killing our local economy, I was saying, what have we done in our local economy, Tina, as the people? Because we normally used to own spaza shops, but today spaza shops are a thing of the past. Mainly because of what? We do not support our own. That's there. That's what I was saying. It's not being xenophobic, whatever the case may be. That's why I was calling an order, because seemingly I'm being painted pictures that I'm xenophobic, I'm privileged because I'm employed and stuff. Those things are some things when we're in these platforms, one must allow that one might speak and what might be against what you are speaking, but it doesn't give you an utmost right to speak as if you are directed to me, because this session must not be a session about what Wonke has said. I was contributing to what we are discussing. It must not be made personal. It be directed to me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for clearing that up, Wonke. That is much appreciated. I think from now we will allow Abongile to ask her question or share her comment, and then afterwards we will move on to the next point, and the speakers can prepare in the meantime.
Afternoon, everyone. I would just like to comment on what Untate Mutse has said and what Uwonke has said. Untate Mutse, good afternoon, comrade. The thing you are saying about government being responsible for the unemployment rate and what is going on right now in South Africa. Yes, as the Unemployed Assembly, we have sat down. I think it was 2018 when we started sitting down and going through a lot of information as into what is really going on. So as the Unemployed Assembly, we are sure, we are positive, we have facts about what we are talking about, that the government is really responsible for what is happening right now on unemployment. And we have facts that yes, that grant can be given to the people. So it is true that it is the government's fault that there is a lot of unemployment in South Africa. The government has for years had training centers in the communities, like in Khayelitsha, everywhere where we are right now in Cape Town. But seemingly they've all closed down. There's no more training centers for people that haven't reached to grade 12. Even the education system here in South Africa is educating children so that they can go and work for the corporate. It's not training the children so that one day you can own your own business. That is what I see when I look at the education system that we have. Seemingly the education system here in South Africa is not equipping the children in a way that when you go out of school, you can own your own company, you can own your own business. No, it equips the children, you can go and work for the men. So as a person that is sitting and watching everything that is going around in South Africa and going on, and with all the information that I have learned under the Unemployed Assembly, as I was saying to you, that it's been years that we've been researching and going through all the stats that we've been given by our learned comrades, as Untate Mutse has said, we have all these things. We know that it's the government's fault, and even now the government can still fix it by giving the people the grant. That's where I stand. And Comrade Wonke, on your side, you are saying that our people have killed their own local economy. Yes, I will go and rent my house to the Somalian, because at the end of the day, I'm also hungry. I don't care about the spaza shop in the corner, because the spaza shop in the corner will not give me food. That's what is happening in the township. It's everybody looking out for themselves. Because of what? Because of poverty. That is what is happening right now in South Africa. Everybody's looking out for themselves because of poverty. Thank you very much. This is where I stand.
Thank you so much, Abongile, for that valuable contribution. You have definitely been noted. So at this point, I think we can just move on and move a little bit deeply into what we have been engaging on already, which is youth unemployment. I think the panelists and some of the guests have mentioned what kind of impact is the youth actually making. And it reminds me of a quote from Chris Hani, which says, we need to create the pathways to give hope to our youth that they can have the opportunity through education and hard work to escape the trap of poverty. So this has been a long-standing argument regarding how it is that we can equip the youth to actually break through this trap of poverty. So the next question that I have for our speakers today, Christina and Mr. Mutsi, will be, how is it that this introduction of a basic income grant, how will it drive change in youth unemployment? Maybe Christina can go first.
Yeah, sure. Sure. So I think all the points that we are discussing are so closely interrelated. And the last person that spoke, I can't remember her name, I'm sorry, but she raised an interesting point that basically said that people are starving, and so they're looking out for themselves. And that is a sociological phenomenon. We see that people that are living in dire circumstances and don't have access to regular sources of water, food, just basic income really, don't act in pro-social ways. So pro-social behavior is essentially when you act in favor of your community. So you do things that would benefit the people that surround you. And so regarding youth unemployment, I think there's this preconceived notion that South African youth are incredibly troubled and just prone to criminality, and that's not it at all. It's the dire circumstances that our youth are growing up in that cause them to behave in antisocial ways that harm society. So, for example, in the Kenyan pilot, we saw that the introduction of a grant resulted in a 43% reduction in crime rates in 6 months. So the fact that people are able to get jobs, and not just jobs at the high end of the spectrum, but also entry-level jobs that don't require any experience or training, the production of those jobs that comes from the introduction of a basic income grant reduces crime, and then subsequently increases employability. We think of the amount of money that our government spends on the police force, the army, Eskom, like fixing transformers where the cables have been stolen or whatever. And if we invested that money, and it's billions, if we invested that into youth empowerment programs, such as the ones that used to happen in Khayelitsha, the potential of our youth is unmatched. So I think we really need to think about that. And also, I just wanted to go into the multiplier effect quickly, because that is a huge argument in favor of the basic income grant. So again, I'm not an economist, but the multiplier effect essentially projects that for every rand invested in a basic income grant, we could generate 2.2% interest on that. And so a multiplier effect is essentially a phenomenon whereby a given change in a particular input, so for example, government spending money on a basic income grant, causes a larger change in output, such as gross domestic product. So we see that the more money we invest by putting it straight into people's hands, especially the youth, results in a growth in our economy. So I definitely think the basic income grant is perhaps the only solution we have that can solve the level of youth unemployment that we are seeing at the moment.
Thank you so much for that insight, Christina, and just making those comparisons between countries like Kenya. And I think I read on earlier this week about the kind of impact that a basic income grant has also had in Brazil. But I think a point that even our finance minister, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, mentioned just a few months ago is he is against the basic income grant, but he rather argues that it's important to equip young people with skills instead of giving them cash grants. And even Abongile mentioned some of the centers that are in her area that were intended to give young people skills, to develop their skills and to prepare them for the working world, have closed down. And maybe something that we can think about even as we are in the session this afternoon is then who is responsible? Who will ensure that there is, sustainability of those centers to actually ensure that the youth can get the skills that they need? Is it something that can be pinned up against the basic income grant? Should we be forced to then choose a basic income grant over skills? But as you mentioned, Christina, that these issues certainly can coexist. And I see Mpomhlongo has commented as well that skills and grants can exist in the same world. I'm not sure if Mr. Mutsi also has something to share about the kind of impact that the basic income grant would have with regards to youth unemployment.
No, thanks, man. I think my colleague, Christian, have captured everything very well. But I just want to touch on three things. One, she already mentioned it. These issues are interrelated. In other words, when we answer, it seems as if we are also answering the other questions. That is number one. And then the other thing is when Godongwana talks about skilling the youth, it is not the first time that we hear that from the ruling party. It is not the first time. Jobs, skills, unemployment, poverty, they are talking about that. Even now they are on the streets talking about the same things. But we are now in 20-something years. without anything happening, but we are seeing the unemployment and the unemployed or unemployment of the youth growing on a daily basis or on a yearly basis. These stats are growing. So Kodongwane must not, I'm sorry to say this, maybe I will also trap on other comrades' toes here. Kodongwane is not a messiah. It's not a messiah. ANC is not a messiah. We are in this situation because of African National Congress and its policies and its ministers as well, because they are the cabinet. They are sitting with Ramaphosa, drafting all these things, implementing them in a wrong way. Because we are now seeing many commissions, people have stealing the money. You know, it is terrible in this. But the other thing that I want to talk to, the youth of this country will never have hope. We can't say the youth, they will be hoping that tomorrow will be better than today. But what they are seeing is that tomorrow will be worse than today. But the comrades have covered me very well when he was presenting in terms of the youth, whether the basic income grant will change the situation of the youth. Yes, it will in reality. Thanks, man.
Thank you so much, Ramudzi, for that. And I see some comments as well in the chat from Dorian saying a multi-layered approach is of utmost importance. The UBIG can be a very powerful tool, but this must be coupled with skills, education, and employment opportunities. And Mpom Hlongo says grants should be used as a means to an end, youth unemployment and skills development. With grants, young people who we know have the greatest potential can kickstart their careers. Others can use that money to upskill themselves. Thank you so much for your comments, and I think they're very valuable. And for now, we will then move on to something that we did touch on earlier, which is where will the money come from? So another perception regarding the basic income grant is that it is not fiscally sustainable. A tax on the wealthy has been suggested. However, it has also been met with a lot of resistance. And last week, Wednesday, we had Dominic Brown from the Alternative Information and Development Center give us a workshop on austerity budgets, which we have also touched on briefly this afternoon. And he touched on the issue of taxing the wealthy to actually ensure that a basic income grant can be given to South Africans. But maybe we could hear the thoughts of our speakers on where will the money come from. I think Christina has some stats for us. Christina, what do the stats say? Where will the money come from for the basic income grant?
So stats regarding economics are definitely not my forte, but I've been working closely with Duma Mbutle, and he is an economist, and he is working on SPI's research paper that is basically looking into the feasibility of a basic income grant and how it can be financed. And Duma was saying the other day that when he was conducting his research, the figures came out even better than he ever could have hoped. And that essentially only 1% of South Africans would actually be affected with regard to their taxes in his proposed modeling. So it really is minimal. And then also when you think about the fact that those South Africans will still get an extra 1,500 Rand, 1,300 Rand a month, it really balances out really well. And also we see that the longer the basic income grant is implemented for, the less it costs. It essentially starts paying for itself because of the revenue that government would make from tax collections, etc. I think also when we talk about feasibility and funding, we also need to consider infrastructure, because it doesn't matter if we can afford it if we don't have the infrastructure necessary to deliver these grants. And so the effective or relatively effective distribution of the COVID Social Relief of Distress grant, the 350, shows that government can effectively distribute large scale grants. we also know that the lack of a means test, so for those of you that don't know, some grants, for example, the social relief of distress grants, are run on means tests, which basically means that every recipient has to prove that they earn below a certain amount in order to be eligible for that grant. So the problem with means tests is that those promote dependency and those promote unemployment, because then people want to earn little enough to be able to afford the grant and will get the grant, but those grants are minimal. So the lack of a means test in a universal basic income grant makes it extremely efficient and easy to distribute, because every South African that applies for it that has an ID number or a passport number would be able to receive the grant. They don't need to do any tests. All they need to do is prove their nationality, essentially. So yeah, I just think that helps a lot. And then also with regards to funding, it's incredibly complicated. I have 2 degrees. I still don't understand most of it. But a few of the funding proposals that we've been researching include utilizing central bank lending, quantitative easing, excess foreign exchange reserves, and basically injecting those into local economies in rands, and then also higher taxes. But like I said, that would literally only affect 1% of the population, and the amount that would benefit from it completely outweighs it. So I hope that's given a little bit of insight as to the funding. But for those that are interested in the more structured and economist-based arguments, they can definitely keep a lookout for our research done by an economist, which will be coming out in the next few weeks.
Thank you so much, Christina. I'm looking forward to that research paper. I'll definitely love to see the stats. Perhaps Mr. Mutsi can weigh in here. Earlier on, you did mention some of the proponents that we can look at, like the PAC, to fund the basic income grant. Maybe you could just tell us a bit more.
No, thanks, man. In terms of where the monies can come from, in terms of sustaining and implementing basic income grant, the comrades have already alluded to that. You just tax the rich. That is number one. Tax the rich people in this country so that they can share their wealth with the poor communities. You can't have Rupert, I'm sorry to mention names here, Rupert bringing in millions on a daily basis without taxing him so that the poor can have a clinic, roads, The other thing, you must stop illicit money flows. There's a lot of money that we have seen when Lonmin workers were fighting at Lonmin, demanding 12.5. Those who have the know-how, they even want to check the books of Lonmin, and then Lonmin didn't agree because they know that they took a lot of money, billions, out of this country without being taxed, and that money must be stopped so that it can't be flowing out of this country without it being taxed. And then the other thing, you must stop corruption. There's a lot of money that is being misused by those who are in power, particularly the African National Congress cadres, because the commissions, it is only them who are attending these commissions because they are stealing, they are even stealing at Lituli House. People are not getting money now there at Lituli House because of corruption. So we must stop corruption. I don't know if Ramaphosa have got the muscle to do that. And then the other thing that the money can come from is from the PIC, as I said, Public Investment Corporation. We know very well that Kodongwane have used that money and then the churches were just being put under the carpet. We know about these things. There's a lot of money which is sitting there, and then everyone from the ruling party wants to put her hands on that particular money of workers. So that money can assist us as unemployed people so that we can generate and maybe grow the economy of this country, so that money can go back again to that PIC corporation. And then there are other means as well. It is not only this one that I've mentioned, and the other one that the comrade have already alluded to. But there are other means that we can sustain basic income grant, and everyone will be happy when basic income grant can be implemented in this country. Thanks, Comrade Chair.
Thank you so much, Ramutsi, for that valuable insight onto where the money can actually come from. I see some more valuable contributions being made even in the chat. The question has been noted, and we will discuss it when we get to the Q&A section. Nikelwa has shared, looking at the context of South Africa right now, basic income grants would do some good. I am questioning the idea of having it as a permanent solution, though. I do think it could kickstart things looking at our current socioeconomic climate, but should not be continuous if we're looking at having citizens that are not completely government reliant. Thank you so much for your comments, everyone. And I think these are really valuable conversations that we can have. And later on, I'd really like us to speak more about where to from here. What is it that we can do? Even though there are 15 people on this call, it's not the number that, kind of matters, but then what is it that we can do going forward? But before we touch on that, I'd like us to speak a bit more about the gender aspect of things. So one of the critical aspects in this regard is actually the impact on women, right? More women are unemployed in comparison to men, and women are more prevalent in the vulnerable informal economy. Women also carry the significantly disproportionate burden of raising children as unpaid caregivers. In South Africa, for instance, 42% of children are raised by their mothers only. And recent research actually indicates that financially vulnerable women in South Africa are more likely to become victims of gender-based violence while being financially vulnerable to men. And these men who are also probably unemployed and financially vulnerable are more likely to be perpetrators of gender-based violence as a result of their need to reassert their masculinity. It is therefore unsurprising, right, that with the rising levels of poverty in South Africa, levels of gender-based violence increase as well. And I'd like to first pull in Christina on this one, because I know she is doing her research on gender-based violence as well. How do you think then the basic income grant can create a positive change, create a turnaround with regards to gender-based violence?
Yeah, I thought I recognized some of those stats that you were saying. I think I mentioned those in a recent article. And they're so interesting, and they're so underreported. So yeah, this is far more suited to my field of expertise. But basically, the theory of intersectionality is one that we use quite a lot in sociology, and it basically states that people face multiple forms of oppression based on their characteristics. So for example, during apartheid, obviously, people of color were at the bottom of the totem pole and faced that oppression. But Black women faced the oppression of being Black, of being women, and then also being segregated essentially to the lower class. There was a quote that I saw that said that if care work was paid in dollars, Black women would be the richest people in the country. So I just thought that was really interesting, and that showcases that Black women have the most to gain, impoverished Black women have the most to gain from this basic income grant, because we see that the burdens placed on them, the amount of single mothers that are left to raise and financially provide for their children is so underreported, under-discussed. in this country. It's shocking. And so this grant will enable women with multiple dependents aid in providing for those dependents. It's what we owe to our women that break their backs working for absolutely nothing. And yeah, women who are overburdened with care work then have an assured monthly income, which is just an absolute game changer. And the NITS crime data was showcasing that South African women are starving in order to shield their families from starvation. The fact that we still have that happening in such a high profile developing country in the 21st century is shocking. We owe it to our women to supply for their dependents and for them. And then also when we talk about gender-based violence, we see the amount, the soaring rape statistics in our country, we can definitely attribute to the fact that men feel as though they need to assert their masculinity because they can't provide for their families, which you mentioned earlier. And that's a huge part of it. But then another part of it is the fact that women are often financially exploited or have to remain in abusive households because they don't have the means to financially support themselves. And we see with the wage pay, the gender pay gap in South Africa, and then also just the fact that South African Black men are far more likely to be employed than South African Black women, that it's placing all of these mounting burdens onto them. And so, yeah, definitely the basic income grant is the best thing that we can do for our Black women, and our women deserve it. I'm not sure if I'm paused.
Thank you so much, Christina. I lost connection there, so I couldn't hear your final part, but thank you so much for sharing. And I think it shouldn't be something that we overlook. At any point when we speak about human rights and socioeconomic rights, the gendered aspect of things should never be overlooked. I'm sure we know a lot of people in this room know women who have had to raise children by themselves. We also know, a lot of women who have to face the brunt of poverty by themselves. We see them in our daily lives. And I think it is quite important that we also consider them and how it is that their lives can get better, not only for them as well, but for their children, as you have shared already. Apologies about that. It seems that my Wi-Fi kicked me out again. Perhaps we can hear Mr. Mutsi. What are your insights on this particular aspect?
Yeah, sometimes you must give me chance before the comrade, because he's talking proper things that I can't just add on. Maybe when I was first, she can do that better, because she's, I'm not attacking the comrade, but I'm saying the truth, because I will take it from the struggles, from what I see on the ground, and then now he can put it in perspective, the way she have put it. So for me, I just want to talk on two things. One, she have already alluded to this. That is why I was saying. Remember that in those 11 to 12 million unemployed people, most of them are women. And Tina, as men, when we arrive at home, what we ask is food from whom? Whereas we are not working. The woman is not even working as well. But when you enter the house, you'll ask, where's the food? Where's pap? Where's cabbage? And then the poor woman will be kicked around the house because of that. And then these men also, they have lost their dignity because of not working and not getting anything any assistance from anybody. Comrades, I've already alluded to this point that some of the applicants of 350 now, they can't even access that particular money because of the red tape that is being put in across by the government in terms of applying through data, all these things, you know. Unemployed people doesn't have those things. Some of these people are coming into our office on a daily basis for us to assist them. So when they arrive at home and then they have failed, they take that anger to their woman. And then we can't allow that situation to continue, really. So those were only two things. I don't want to destroy what the comrade have already said. He said a mouthful of what the situation of women in this country are. But also, comrades, the blame should be put on the doorstep of this government. We can't say it is you as the chairperson of this meeting that you are wrong. No, the government is wrong. The government is implementing wrong policies. That is why we are in this situation. During apartheid, people were working, even if they were not getting proper salaries. But today you lost your job. After 2 weeks, you are employed. But in this country, they are saying you must stay home with your children. They will give your children 450. And then I don't know if anyone have grown up with 450 up to 18 years. So those are the problems that we are having. What we need in this country is the system change. We should change the capitalist system to a more social system that will embrace everybody, not only those who have, and then those who doesn't have anything. We can say, no, let them die. We'll see them after 5 years when we need votes. Really, it is just painful. But thanks, Comrade Chair.
Thank you so much, Ramuti. Actually, your insights are that much more valuable because you are on the ground and interacting with everyone who's facing this difficulty on a daily basis. So we really do appreciate your insights, and you put it perfectly into perspective for us. Unfortunately, we have run slightly over time, but before we conclude and go on about our day, I'd really like us to speak more about where to from here. Then we have, considered the merits and demerits of a basic income grant. We have, given light to the debates around it, the dependency, just eliminating the misconceptions about a basic income grant creating a dependency. And we've spoken about the greater need to actually have it implemented in our country. But where to from here? What path can we then set foot on? And what is it that private citizens can do? How do we get there? How do we get South Africa to a place where there is no gender-based violence? Poverty and inequality are just a thing of the past. Then how do we actually get there? What could be the next step? Ramuti, do you have maybe something to share with us on this point?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Our government doesn't listen to anyone. This is a demand. This is a demand that is across the board. We have trade unions who are supporting us. We have comrade who is part of this discussion who are also supporting us. We have Black Sash who wants to take litigation on this matter. We have AIDC as well, who's also wants to take a route of litigation. But mine will be mobilize, organize, or die. So we should organize our poor people in terms of supporting this demand so that the government can implement this demand. Even if Black Search and the others are taking the route of litigation, but we should mobilize our people, particularly those who are poor people on the ground, including ourselves, not only the poor, but yourself as well. When you are doing these topics here, you are also assisting us in terms of mobilizing others so that they understand our dire situation that we find ourselves in. So we must organize people, we must mobilize people, or we will die if we are not doing that. Because those who are poor will rise up. And then when they rise up, nobody will be controlling them. We have seen what happened in Durban, what happened in Gauteng. Even now, that situation is not proper dealt with. People can't just go to next door and buy something because shops are looted. So we don't want that. But the government must come in and support the poor people with this basic income grant so that we can stop GBV, we can stop corruption, we can stop, our children are using drugs now. Why are they doing that? Why the people, those children in suburbs are not doing that? Because they are in a dire situation. But thanks, Comrade Chair.
Thank you so much, Ramudzi, for that valuable insight into where it is that we can go and actually who are the people who can help. You mentioned trade unions like Black Sash and, even going the strategic litigation route. Perhaps we can hear from Christina. What do you think we can do next? Yes.
So I shared an infographic in the chat for everyone to see, and that's basically what we've been working on at SPY. And we're also working on the creation of a basic income grant website that would essentially have information to a bunch of testimonies from people on how it would impact, how it would change their lives, and also research and media articles. So for anyone from citizens that aren't able to read and understand basic income grant research, there are other means of exploring what it means and understanding what a basic income grant is. I think also definitely sharing, talking to people talking to your family about it. We need support on the ground. And that's why Comrade was mentioning mobilizing, and that is exactly what we need to do. If the July protests, instead of containing the looting sprees, which really hurt the economy, if we saw protests, peaceful protests in favor of a basic income grant, I have no doubt that we would be a lot further in this debate with government than we are now. So we need to tell people what it is, what it would do for them, and why it's important to get it now. I think the call for a basic income grant has probably been going on longer than since I was in nappies, but I hope to see it evolve before I get too old. We need it now more than ever. And I think it's a real turning point in the trajectory of our country. If we get this, it could change everything for us and for those that need it most. We can't afford not to have it. And even the rich, the amount of financial gains that they would get from the basic income grant, just in terms of the multiplier effect and how much more investable our economy would become, it benefits everyone. So we need to get people talking about it. We need to tell everyone that we know what it is and why they need to advocate for it.
Thank you so much, Christina, for that valuable insight. I think you and Ramudzi are on the same page with regards to mobilizing and organizing and making sure that people actually know about this basic income grant, the benefits of it, and how it is it can change the future of South Africa. Thank you so much. For now, we'll have a brief period for questions and answers. I see Lyle has his hand up. Do you perhaps have a question?
Yeah, it's not so much a question as it is a comment. So I think we also need to move to a point within our societal structures where we don't just talk about things. And this is something that I've remarked on in a few dialogues, is that we are a country of grand laws and policies, and constantly, we have this really good constitution and we have all these progressive policies. The problem really starts with implementation, particularly at a ground level. I don't even think that there are a lot of, like, let's say even councillors that even understand what the policies actually entail. So I think it would be very prudent for us to understand, like, how do we practically move forward, you know? Yes, they can put in a policy for the basic income grant, and then obviously the national health insurance, which is another dialogue. I'm not starting another discussion on the health insurance thing, but I think it also needs to come to a point where I agree. So yeah, I agree with Darian, where you're saying that it needs to be a multi-layered approach, which is the truth. The basic income grant, the universal basic income grant, can't be a silver bullet like Christina mentioned in the beginning. It needs to be a phase. So yes, it will help us really well in the short and even in the medium term. But as a long-term solution, we need to come with accompanying strategies, things like skills development, things like job creation, pushing up the education standards, particularly primary education, because we have a really good standard when it comes to, we have a world-class standard actually in tertiary education, but our primary and secondary education is not really up to scratch, and we could be doing much better. So if we can then get these levels up, get more people educated, get more skills involved, your plumbers, your electricians, your artisans, so forth, you know, whatever skills that we need, particularly that for the fourth industrial revolution, which is something that gets thrown around all the time. Then a basic income grant would be so impactful, and then South Africa could really stand as an example of how this could actually work in a practical sense. So as civil society and as private individuals, we also need to move to a point where we're actually educating those around us in our immediate spheres of influence. So that is going to be of the utmost importance with the universal basic income grant. There are points from Comrade Motsi that I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think that it would make sense to blame the state for everything. As citizens, we also need to take a certain amount of responsibility for certain situations. I'm not saying that people ask to be poor. What I am saying is that we should actively engage the state, not just point fingers and cry wolf. We need to constantly engage with stakeholders. We need to also move to a point where we support one another in our local economy. I think maybe that was something that Wonke didn't put in such a nice term or in an articulate term. We need to support our local economies. And my point is that it doesn't matter if it's a Somalian or if it's a South African. We need to support within our communities. We need to support our local businesses. This will encourage spending. This will encourage more entrepreneurship and so forth. So it literally we need to change the total dynamic. And instead of taking a 360, we need to make a 180 and go the other way. This really changes the trajectory, because working for Africa Unite, they would point out that it is important to inculcate attitude and behavior changes. Because if you can change the attitudes and behaviors of a specific community, obviously coupled with practical solutions, then you change the trajectory of the community, because you look at issues with a different perspective. So that is just my input on the entire dialogue. I was a bit quiet earlier, but technical issues. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lau. That's really, really important to note. And just to look at time a bit, maybe Mira can go. Do you have a question?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Very interesting dialogue. Yes, I do have a question, and that has to do with the definition. So universal basic income grant, does that mean, because earlier it was mentioned that you just need a South African passport and then you are entitled to get this grant. So what if you do earn like 10,000 Rand a month? Can you still then get that basic income grant on top, or how would that technically work? Or do you have to be unemployed? Because that wouldn't make sense. So maybe just some feedback on that.
Thank you so much, Mira. I think it is quite important to clarify that. I see Christina has a camera on.
Yeah, I can respond. So we're advocating for a universal basic income grant, which essentially means that every South African citizen between the age of 18 and 59 will be allowed to receive this grant, or entitled to receive it. Whether or not they follow that up and go to collect their grants is a completely different matter. In most scenarios where grants are universal, which by nature of the word means that they're available to everyone, only around 60% of people actually take them up and go and get those grants. Basically, if we do that in an electronic manner, then it would make it much easier to dispense it. And there have been talks with Microsoft around giving every single South African citizen a phone or a tablet, which would essentially act as an e-wallet to receive the funding. But that is still in the process of being scrutinized and being worked out. But then also, what we are advocating for is the scrapping of the caregivers grant and the child support grant and the pensioners grant, and making it all in one. So every South African, no matter how old, is entitled to 1,335 Rand a month, whether it is a baby or a billionaire that is 60 years old. Yeah, so I hope that that explains it, Mira. And yeah, it's a common misconception that a basic income grant only goes to the poorest of the poor. And that, I think, is where the miscommunication regarding the fact that it promotes unemployment comes in. Yeah, you don't need to earn below a certain amount. You don't need to earn any amount to get the basic income grant that we are promoting.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying. And then I'm wondering, could that potentially lead to maybe like also an increase in rent or less salary, so that business say, yeah, if you can get an extra 1.5, then we are going to pay you less? Is that something that could happen, like as a response to introducing such a thing?
Yeah, so the amount that we have budgeted on has taken all of this into consideration. It's not large enough to make a difference to the amount, to the cost of basic goods. And that includes rent, millie meal, bread, that sort of thing, milk. So it doesn't necessarily mean that those prices are going to up because it's only 1.3. If we saw a grant of around 4,000, 5,000 Rand, then I think definitely inflation would automatically result from that. But because of the number selected, it's not big enough to make a difference to inflation, but it is big enough to give the poorest of the poor access to their basic necessities. So I hope that that makes sense and that I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much. That was good.
All right. Thank you so much, Mira, for the question, and Christina for answering. Are there any other questions, everyone?
Can I just come in on two things, maybe? Can I do that, Comrade Chair?
Yes, you may.
Oh, no, thanks. Really, it is impossible not to blame the state, not to blame the government when we are in this situation. It is just impossible. Whom should we blame? Ourselves? Are we running the country as the people? Because even if they are doing the budget, you talk about municipal budgets, they are not consulting with us. They will be consulting with a cabal somewhere. And then that budget will hear that it has been passed in a local government municipality. So really we should blame the government. That is number one. Number two, is this constitution very, 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 it is, I know it's a motto. Is it very good? Do we have a very good constitution? Whereas those who are supposed to implement the very good constitution can't implement it. If it was a so good constitution, these comrades in parliament should have implemented everything in this constitution. You talk about land. Black people doesn't have land, but the constitution is so good, is so proper. The other thing that maybe there is a problem with is in terms of the basic income grant. Now we are saying people who are supposed to get the basic income grant are those who are not getting anything, even from the government. Remember, a person or a child from 0 months to 18 years is getting something from the government. Those who are from 60 upwards, they are getting something from the government. But those who are between 18 and 60, which is 59, they are not getting anything rather than the 350, which is a useless money. So that is our target as Assembly of the Unemployed. But we are not closing doors to other comrades to engage us in terms of understanding their perspective and how do they want us to move forward, all of us. So we are open for discussion. Even Comrade Wonke, you are invited to our meetings, so that you can put your issues across as we are doing now. I was not fighting you, Comrade. I'm sorry if you felt that way. I'm very sorry, but the reality have to be said, Comrade Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ramotsi, for clarifying and for also just touching on what Lyle also mentioned earlier, that the challenge in South Africa that we have faced for so long is actually implementation. So we might have a very good constitution and we might have really good policy frameworks, but we need to kind of be a bit more proactive when it comes to implementation. And I see as well in the chat, Paul commented by saying the government has a duty to protect and promote the rights enshrined in the Constitution. We have responsibilities as citizens for sure, but these do not absolve the government from fulfilling its duties. The former has a responsibility to develop policies that will create an environment whereby rights can be realized. And definitely that is very true. It's not just the country that belongs to the government, but as people, even as Lyle mentioned earlier, we really need to take accountability as well, or even keep the government accountable. But I do not want to take even more time. Miguel, I see your hand is raised. Do you have a question?
Yeah, can you hear me? No, I just wanted to ask because, well, I think the case of Brazil was mentioned. And from what I know, that was a very successful case, like one of the most successful cases in like alleviating poverty and development and promoting development within the world. So I wanted to know, like, because in that case there were like conditionalities to receiving that grant. It wasn't universal, it was more to the poorest section of societies. But has there like maybe been any discussion of what kind of conditionalities could there be? Like if someone receives it, like will they be like actively looking for a job, or maybe also bringing to the idea of like the like a woman, like will women maybe be promoted to maybe take their children to school because they will be given also a grant, so they will be able to provide for these children, and also like encourage them to a more healthy lifestyle, a more active lifestyle in the communities. Has there been any discussions on conditionalities to receive this, or maybe even added bonuses to this universal, to this basic income grant in that sense?
Thank you so much, Miguel, for that question. I'm not sure if our panelists caught that, but the question is basically around seeing what kind of conditionalities can be put in place for the basic income grant. Have there been any recommendations to actually have it be maybe means tested, just like our social grants are means tested currently in South Africa? I'm not sure if Ramotsi or Tina would like to take this one.
Motsi, if you want to go ahead, I can come in after you. It's up to you.
No, you can take a lead, Cole.
Okay. I think that it is vital that we we advocate for an unconditional basic income grant for several reasons. Firstly, because a means test makes people want to be unemployed. It's a double-edged sword. It's like, I can't earn enough. Rather, let me reword it and say, I don't want to work and earn so little and then receive the basic income grant. It's counterintuitive, because if you want to promote employment, you want people to try and get jobs, try and work, try and increase their income. So any form of conditions are just, yeah, there's no way to implement those conditions fairly, and I think that they're almost always counterintuitive. So yeah, I hope that explains it. I was hoping to word myself a bit more succinctly, but it all boils down to the fact that it needs to be unconditional so that it can be rolled out really easily, and also so that it promotes employment. And then also, when you restrict things, and say, for example, some conditionality in some countries, they say like you can't use it on alcohol or on cigarettes, that kind of thing, like luxury items. And when you do that, when you limit and take away the agency for people to choose what they spend their money on, it's counterintuitive, and it makes them behave in antisocial ways. So we see that alcohol abuse and stuff are more prone when alcohol is limited. And it's the same thing with conditionality. So I think whilst in theory conditionality may make it seem as though we can regulate who gets the grant and make sure the most deserving get it, in reality and in practice, it often does the complete opposite. And yeah, and that's also when we see room for corruption. When a grant is universal and unconditional, and every single South African has opportunity to claim it, there's far less room for corruption, because the checks and balances are so clear, if that makes sense. So you don't get people that shouldn't be getting it because they have a friend in government. Yeah, I hope I've answered your question. Just let me know if I haven't.
Is that a sufficient
Yeah.
answer, Miguel?
No, yeah, thank you very much, Christina. That was very informative. And I guess like every country has its own situation and its own context. So yeah, I completely agree with all you said.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for your question, Miguel, and for to Christina as well. Thank you so much for answering. Do you have maybe one last question or comment? All right. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. A special thank you to Mr. Mutsi from the Assembly of the Unemployed and Christina from the Studies of Poverty and Inequality Institute for sharing such valuable insights with us this afternoon. Thank you so much for the work that you do and the work that your organizations do as well to pave the way towards a better South Africa. Thank you so much to all our participants as well this afternoon for really being so interactive and engaging on this issue, which is really quite important. And I hope that you took as much out of it as possible, and that you will be able to be the change agents in the communities that you are in to really start the necessary conversations that we need to have. And like our speakers have shared, to educate, to engage, to mobilize, and to organize so that we can really work towards building a better South Africa. Before we head out to gear up for the long weekend, I know it is Heritage Day on Friday. I do hope that we have registered to vote on the 1st of November. We can have long discussions, probably longer dialogues than this one, about change, but it is really through exercising our democratic right to vote that we can do our part to see and be the change that we want in our country. So see you at the polls on the 1st of November to make our voices heard. And this is all from us here at Africa Unite. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great afternoon. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
We'll see. The morning, Celeste, just checking up.